Who do you think would win? A fire-toting machine gun or some random guy named Greg? For the Gregs, it is the better bossing weapon. We got it down to 9 seconds with a more general setup that works for every character. And we'll talk about a Gley specific one. And then for the Enduring Legacy, it ranged around 12 to 14. With both of these guns, you can kind of fish for faster times due to not only the crit rates, but also the special effect. And we're going to start this bad boy off with looking at the more generic build they can run on everybody for Gregs, and we'll start to transition from there. So here's what we were running on the Gregs for that Devour run that was 9 seconds. And we can shave this down by additional 2, maybe even potential 3, by throwing on Mental Focus, which works out fantastic for Gley because you're able to use increased sensory and just loop your ammo and keep this stacked up until the enemy ends up enraging. If I was going to hard lock in an element into the gun, it would more than likely either be electric or fire enhancement. Fire enhancement would be really good against Gluttony as well as Frostwalker. And personally, from my experience, I find Frostwalker and of course Gluttony to be harder than Molten Fortress. And just adding that little bit of extra fire damage, even though it's going to be resistant against some of those enemies, you get a lot more value on enemies that do matter, which is, or enemy that matters, which is Gluttony for the most part. The other element would be electric enhancement, which is going to be able to lower the defense of the enemies a little bit. It's not actually a significant increase in damage that you're dealing. It's a very, very small amount. Electric is one of the least resistant elements inside the game. So if you were to hard lock an element, it would be one of those two. So I like the setup a lot for multiple reasons. One, this is a good general setup and it can end up working on Gley, give her a little bit of a damage boost. Chill enhancement, you can swap for expand weapon charge, which will give you more rounds per magazine on somebody that's not Gley. And this will add more damage per minute overall to the setup. And for whatever reason, if you don't want to run Fire Conductor and you still are on Gley, so with this, it's still a pretty versatile setup. You can play around with it. So just real quick, how bombardment works. You have a chance of proccing a bombardment, and the bombardment does as much damage as the shot that triggered it. And when you shoot the target, let's go ahead and shoot in the head. 125. And that was 135 because we have an additional element to it. So you see that additional 9,500 plus additional 125, which got out to that 135. So in theory, chill enhancement was a fantastic pickup because you're able to slow down enemies, which means that you're going to be able to hit them with more bombardments most of the time. But the problem is the 7% trigger rate. So we're not really proccing that slow that much on the big boys. So while it's cool, and while they're cool, you get it because it's chill, it doesn't work that well. So now we're going to transition to a segment called Does It Work? And we are going to put on Sharp Precision Shot. Bada boom, bada bing. We're going to hold this down. And we can see that it does not work. Pretty simple concept. Now let's go ahead and throw on something else that would be something that people think would work. Real life fighter. Now, if you hit the target, it does work. We see that it stacks up, right? Now let's shoot it some more. Now what you probably noticed there is that the number of stacks went down, even though we ended up hitting the target in the head, which is the weak point. When the meteors end up going down, or the bombardment, we lose our real life fighter stacks. So it is counterintuitive to run that on this good old weapon. One of the biggest boosts that you can actually do to Gregory if you do not have this setting on is open up your settings, go to options, gameplay, and scroll all the way down to control method, and then change the firing mode. Now when you change the firing mode to on, you're able to hold down the button instead of you having to tap it over and over again. While the DPS of Gregory is definitely better than the Enduring Legacy, the Enduring Legacy is able to pump out fantastic crit damage. For the vials that pop up on bosses when they enrage, when you want to break them, weak point does not get applied, which is a little bit odd, but you are able to add that crit damage to them and break these pretty easily, which is fantastic with the Enduring Legacy. Also on those enemies that are smaller, such as those enemies from the Void Reactor and inside the dungeon, you are able to just mow them down with the Enduring Legacy at a pace that I found to be a bit better than Gregory's, because you aren't really going to hit a smaller target with the bombardment that much. And Deborah was one of the tests that I wanted to do because she is weak to fire, as well as a smaller model that moves around at a pretty good pace. But Greg still outperformed. With Greg's, we have the 2 minute and 32 seconds for the 47 million. This was inside of group play. Works out pretty decently. And then when we compare it to the time that we got for Enduring Legacy, we match up the times as well as the damage. It looks like it's pretty much on par. But the big thing to keep in mind is that when I was using their Enduring Legacy, the enemy was knocked out of their frenzy pretty quickly by busting the vials. While when I was using Greg's, the enemy was making their way downtown, walking fast, the faces passed, and they were homebound. Like, they got to enjoy the whole frenzy bar. So here's what we have on our Enduring Legacy. Firearm crit hit damage, bonus firearm attack versus Colossus, and firearm attack. This weak point damage is okay. I would actually swap this out with fire attack. Not firearm attack, but actually fire attack damage. So this is what we're rocking on Enduring Legacy at the moment. Now for everybody else, I would swap out this weak point sight into this right here. That is going to allow us to get more rounds per magazine, which is going to be more DPM. And we're going to look at the math on Enduring Legacy when it comes to edging shot. Because this right here, 15% negative to firearm attack seems atrocious. And we'll talk about fire priority as well. So for the math, we just want to make sure these numbers match up. This is a quick snapshot of what we have for Enduring. And then we're going to swap over to the display capture. And this is what we have inside the calculator. Unfortunately, your boy does not have dark mode. I didn't download the plugin for that. But it's a big shout out to Batak and Azeroth. They ended up making this calculator a while back, and now they are PoE gamers. This 27% right here, we just utilize this in order to get to this 26,967, which is the same thing that we see inside the game itself. So we can keep this thing relatively simple. With edging shot, we get negative 15% firearm attack, and we get that 43% critical hit rate. And we are going to look at total WP DPS with crit. We'll look at these numbers right here. So 2 million, 2.1 million, and this is 91.4 million. And this is with the weak point multiplier bonus, as well as the 11% that we're getting from there. Let's go ahead and swap to Insight Focus. And Insight Focus gives us 14.5. So we drop this. We are checking in game to make sure everything matches. 28941, 28941, and our crit hit rate is 31.7. This one is a bit too high. So we're just going to lower this number till we get to that 30.42 that we see inside the game. So the big thing is to make sure that this number matches or is as close as possible to what we see inside the game when we open up that tab. And we see right here we have 1.9 instead of 2.1. And we are at the 84 million, almost 85 million for this. So we can see that the high critical hit damage of the weapon allows edging shot to scale past what we're scaling with Insight Focus. The best thing about math, especially chance-based math inside of video games, is that you can take this exact same setup and deal less damage, and you can take this exact same setup and deal more damage. So ultimately, play around with it. This is what the math supports. And you can see and adjust to what feels right for you, because there are still some factors inside this game that people aren't too aware of. Crit resistance is something that does pop up a decent bit, and if you're dealing 15% less with each shot, while the enemy has that crit resistance to it, you can go on a bad streak and not deal as much as what you've seen inside this video. One other thing that you can play around with is play around with that fire priority instead of weak point sight, because some people don't always hit the weak point, which is very reasonable because most people don't always hit the weak point. So that fire priority, because you're adding extra fire attack to an already fire attack linear weapon, you will also see pretty good results. A quick note, because I wanted to test out mental focus as well as sharp precision shot, inside of the Dead Bride runs, I ran 9 modules for Greg's as well as 9 modules for the Enduring Legacy. You will 100% see more damage with the 10 slots fully utilized. So here's what we have running right here. HP just stomps defense. Defense does not seem to be too crazy nowadays. What you do want is to have resistance against the boss that you're fighting. So against something like Gluttony, that chill resistance is going to be fantastic. You can play around with the 2 and 2 piece set, or you can fully commit to Veterans, which is going to give you a big firearm attack as well as a big weak point damage increase. Both of these are fantastic. We're looking for max HP and potentially fire resistance for your power. For here, you're looking for chill resistance as well as HP modifier for your sensor. Consumable drop rate is also solid as an alternative. Here you see the HP recovery modifier. For your memory, defense, and electro resistance, and then for your processor, on Gley in particular, it doesn't really matter too much other than the toxin resistance. And here's what we're running for a gun Gley. You want to make sure you have enough duration as well as cooldown. That way you're able to get some clean loops. And pretty basic setup. Walker Tightrope, you can swap this out for HP Collector if you want to sustain a little bit better. Shot Focus, of course, is to add some extra damage. This is a X underneath there, so you can swap that with HP Collector right here if you really wanted to. And here we have Maximize Conservation, which is going to reduce the skill cost by 35% in trade for our skill power modifier. Now this is going to be a big help. So with resistance, for this particular case, we're able to take a lot less damage, and then when we are utilizing our skills, we are killing ourselves less, which is, you know, a pretty good thing to do inside of a game. And this helps to alleviate the need to use mass sanguine to heal that much, although we still can use it if there are enough targets up. If there are not enough targets up and you feel like you need more sustain past the skill cost reduction, then HP Collector is going to be a great fix. And if you aren't able to pick up enough consumables, get back enough HP, there are some things that you can adjust from there as well. Ultimately, build feels pretty good. You have the survivability, you have the damage, and let me know what you think. If you have any questions about anything, I'm out of here for now. Adios.